welcome to Game Set Match Up, the podcast where we talk everything partnerships, the good, the bad and the ugly.
Welcome to Game Set Match Up, the podcast where we discuss all things partnerships. Brought to you live from Money20 here in Amsterdam. I'm your host, Greg Watts, and I'm joined by co-host and co-founder and COO of Finder, Jenny James. Please welcome our guest today, Sinead McHale, CEO of cashflow fintech Satago. Sinead, hello and welcome to Amsterdam.
Hi, thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
How are you?
I'm good.
You look all right. You look good.
It's the start of the week, so we'll see how it pans out.
Well, look, let's kick off with some intros. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about who you are, your background, and your role at Satago?
Okay, great. So I am Sinead, CEO of Satago. Satago started off as a cash flow forecasting tool, and then, pandemic hits, we moved from working directly with SMEs to pivoting the business to provide lending software for banks. So I think like many, not just fintechs, many small businesses ourselves, which is what we are, we had to make a decision. Pandemic hits, we were working directly with SMEs. They weren't borrowing, they weren't doing credit control. And so we just had to recognize that if we were to survive and transition through that phase, we had to do something different. And so essentially we took our core proposition, which is our tech platform, our lending platform, which we know is one of the best in the space, went out to banks, and we're now a provider of lending software for banks globally. So that's Satago. Gone through a lot of changes since, I took over Satago like 8 years ago. It's been a while.
A few years.
It's been a while. And so that's who we are today. So yeah, that's Satago. Personally, my background, I have come from, investment banking, which actually is a bit of I don't even know how I ended up in that space, but when I think back to where I've come from a family of entrepreneurs. So for me to go into something like investment banking was a bit random, and I always remember, I caught up with somebody recently that I worked with in Deutsche Bank 20 odd years ago. And one of the pieces of advice he gave me early days was, you do not belong in banking. It was like, you're an entrepreneur, you need to work for yourself. I took it as an insult. I was just like, what, he thinks I'm not good enough at my job? But actually, on reflection, he was 100% right. And I met him recently at an event, and he was like, just look how much you've achieved now, with Satago, with the business. And I was like, yeah, I couldn't be happier. So it's that evolution, I think, of started out investment banking, and now I've kind of gone back to being an entrepreneur, being a business owner myself, which is, my history, my family's background, etc.
Brilliant. And speaking of that transition, so obviously there's something your old colleague spotted in you, or certain qualities. What would you say those qualities are, or what kind of was that, what generated you wanting to move out of investment banking and into entrepreneurship?
I think there's a couple of things. The first thing was I was never very good at being told what to do.
I didn't know that.
So I think if you're going to run your own business, you need to be tenacious, you need to be determined, and you need to never give up.
Yes.
And I'm not sure that you can do that in a much larger organizations where there's regulatory requirements, where there's just structure. You're a cog in a wheel. And I think personally for me, with what I've done at Satago and like in previous businesses, you've got that ownership and accountability. And that's really important to Satago today. Like I say, everybody who joins the business, it is about accountability, is about that ownership. And it's not a passive environment where you can kind of stand back and comment. It's about rolling up your sleeves and getting involved.
Yep.
So I think they're probably the characteristics that have stood by me in my career to date.
Yeah, like getting stuff done, not wanting to be held back, and wanting to act on something when you have the idea.
Also, and I think also not being restrained by your job title.
Oh, God, yeah.
Because I think, you're both business owners, right? So one day you're doing payroll, the next thing you're doing your accounts, you're doing marketing, you're doing pitches, you're dealing with customer complaints. And I do think that takes a certain skill set. You're not defined by your role, and you're not limited by your role. You as an entrepreneur, and whether you're the business owner or you're somebody in the business, I think that they're the traits that I would look for people that would like to be part of the Satago future.
Absolutely. And think about the partnerships that you've formed in the business. So I know Lloyds and Sage are some of the major partners you have. What role have they played, and what role does partnerships now play within the business?
So I think they were transformational in terms of the growth of Satago. We started off as being direct to SME, and like lots of other fintechs, we knew we had a really good solution. We thought we could go direct to market. And in principle, you can, but you need significant investment marketing budgets to do that. Quite a long runway to do that. Now, our proposition is built for SMEs, but we would also recognise that really to be able to work with those SMEs and to get the reach and scope that we wanted, we needed to partner with bigger organisations. And so if I take somebody like Sage, we first started speaking to Sage back in like 2016, 2017. We've signed our first contract with them in 2018. That's a long-standing relationship. Like that's 7 or 8 years. And I think what brought us together and why it's been successful is I'll speak about us. We went into it going, we love what you guys are doing. We're really interested in the customer base that you're working with, and we think our solution really sits nicely along yours. We weren't pushy. It was more consultative. And so over, the last 7 years, we've built up a really good relationship. So it's the relationship, I think, with the other entity.
Yeah.
I think it's having a solution that sits along nicely to these customers. So you're not trying to force a sale.
Yeah.
I think that's also key. So it's making sure that it's the right fit. And I also think there's a lot about just the honesty and respect of a relationship. Like a fintech working with a big corporate, there are pros and cons to everything. It can define you, but it can also break you.
Yeah.
That's a very good summary.
Yeah. It's hard, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
it's very hard.
We also work with the banks as well, and we have a great relationship with the Lloyds. We're reinventing invoice financing and working capital, if you like, in that space. That's a huge initiative to take on board, and so their confidence in us to deliver, but also our commitment to them to deliver. It's that kind of mutual respect. And are there challenges? Absolutely, because we're a young fintech. We're very eager to go. We want to move quickly. And so it's been respectful within large corporates, I think, of the governance structure, of the regulatory pieces, all of those things that we don't necessarily consider, but are there in the background. So I think success, if I think back about what we've done well and what we've done badly, you need to start day one, blank piece of paper and go, okay, what are you looking to achieve? What are we looking to achieve? Let's agree what those metrics are. And if at any point along the journey we deviate from that, or there's some challenges, or there's some heated conversations, we're able to refer back to that point. And I think it just focuses the mind. And I think the second thing is also it's about celebrating the wins.
Yeah.
Because if you're part of a big project, there's peaks and troughs of frustration and delays, all of these things that can become quite negative. So it's also important to step back and recognize what you've achieved along the way. And that's something at Satago we're not great at doing. So we're trying to get better at it, that recognition of actually look at what we've achieved in a short space of time.
It's easy, isn't it, though, when you're focused on the next thing, and maybe if it's a longer term piece, I think it is really key to stop and celebrate the incremental wins along the way. But it's also very easy not to see that because the focus is always on the next milestone and the next thing. So it's striking that balance, isn't it, in terms of stopping to smell the roses whilst continuing to be focused on what's next.
And I also think if you're a business owner and you've people working for you, I look at that I'm responsible for these people and they've got mortgages and children and commitments and bills to pay. And so it is about moving on to the next thing in terms of that revenue line and keeping the business going, because it's a difficult market at the moment. It's not easy to raise capital. The market has shifted. Demand has shifted. I think what VCs want now versus what they wanted a few years ago, it's narrower.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that needs to be considered in this space. So there's a lot there's a lot of responsibility that comes with running a business, but also I think the joy that you get out of it, which probably sounds a little bit sappy, it's huge, right? It's that accomplishment of we've done something. It's not we've done something. I think that's significant, and it's great to be part of that.
But you have to do things which bring you joy. So I don't think it's sappy at all. I think that's the perfect world. But I'm curious, looking at Satago, in your experience after your many years, what would you say makes for a gold star partnership or a brilliant deal?
Okay, I think there's what you think a gold star partnership is at the start. And then what it looks like 6 or 12 months later. So again, I think it's going back to 3 simple things. Number one, make sure that you're compatible, that you're both in it for the same reasons. You've got to be aligned in terms of what you want to do. I think number two, you've got to be very honest in terms of what you're bringing to the table and also what your expectations are from the other side. Because I think if they're not aligned, that's where challenges come out further down the line. And I think the third piece is about being realistic and probably honest about when there's challenges and just stop. Don't keep muddling through, hoping it'll get better. Stop, take a step back and go, okay, we probably need to reassess and maybe we need to pivot slightly. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And it's that awareness, I think, probably more than anything else. I think if you do that and you get those foundations right, you can do anything.
Yeah.
We recently did an event with EY and with the Lloyds Bank, and I refer to it almost like a marriage.
Well, it is like a marriage.
Yeah.
It is like, or any relationship.
It is, any relationship, right? It's never, every day is not golden, every day is not great, but it's almost like when don't let the tough conversations overhang.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to have them.
I think at the heart of it, in my humble opinion, I think in any relationship, the cornerstone or the foundation, call it whatever you will, it has to be trust. Always has to be trust. Because if the trust is there, then everything else can be built and layered on top of it. You know, do I trust them? Do I trust myself and them to be open, you know, all amongst ourselves so that we can work through this? Is the trust there? Because sometimes it's hard. It can be hard to have those tough conversations. You have to trust in the relationship in order to have them.
Yeah. And I think also, you know, if you're a small fintech and you're working with a big corporate, sometimes there can be like an imbalance of power.
It can feel like that.
And it can feel like that. And I think sometimes you're like, God, I can't say that. I'm afraid to say that. I don't want to rattle the boat and stuff. But you've got to.
Yeah.
You have to.
You have to. Yeah. And I think they're the things you learn as you go along. And I think if it's a respectful relationship and it's a relationship of equal measures, you can have those conversations without worrying about what the implications are that of.
It's a little bit like you said at the beginning, you know, it's not forcing something that's not right and then having the foundations, because if you've agreed on the principles, if something veers away, you're coming back to something that's collectively agreed.
Yeah.
So regardless of one organisation being an enterprise and another being a startup, you're coming back to something that you've agreed collectively.
Yeah.
So it should keep, you know, the power's never going to be completely equal, but it should allow in the relationship for it to be at least more aligned.
I think so, and I think it goes both sides, because it's a huge amount of trust a corporate or a large entity is put in place with a fintech, and so it's been mindful of that as well. Don't overpromise and under-deliver. Like it is just bringing it back to basics of how you would operate in a day-to-day. We've been really fortunate in the partnerships that we have, and not just with the big corporates, but you know, there's other fintechs that we work with, and I would say those relationships equally can be as challenging, because fintech's quite scrappy, limited resources, and so you go into a meeting, you're excited about the prospect of what could be, but you've got limited resource, maybe you've got conflicting priorities, and you know, sometimes as a CEO, you're very forthright in terms of what you want the team to do, but maybe they disagree with that, and they want to focus on another partnership or another solution. So it's fintech to fintech as much as it is fintech to corporate or larger institute.
Absolutely. So thinking about how you go about forming the partnership. So you talked about kind of what makes a Gold Star partnership. What do you think, I guess, would be the key thing someone should consider first when they're starting off on their partnership journey?
I would say do your research and don't go after the name. Don't go after the brand name of a big corporate because you think they would look good on your website. I think you've got to be aligned in terms of what your solution is and how it can work with that third party, be it fintech, be it large corporate, whatever it is. And I think if you're aligned, it just makes the relationship stronger, but it also, you're building for success. So I think that's the first piece. The second piece I would say is don't change your solution as a business to fit in what the other person wants, because remember, that's not necessarily what you started out to do. Now, earlier I said, you know, we pivoted as a business. We did because of the macro and micro environment around us. It was about survival. But I think when you're starting off with a fintech, it's very easy to get over enamored with a large corporate.
Yeah. And start to over customize to
Yeah,
the point that
exactly.
you lose your product.
Particularly a bank.
I think banks, but I would also say, you know, I think of some of the large corporates that we've spoken to, where we've spent months speaking to them, and then they've decided not to proceed. And we've spent a lot of time, energy, product time, trying to tie in with what they wanted versus maybe kind of losing sight of what we were doing because we liked the name. So I think but that only comes with experience, and probably it only comes with being burnt a couple of times.
Yeah, of course.
Look, that's the other thing about being the CEO of a business. You will always, always, always be optimistic about who you're speaking to.
Yeah.
And that's why you have a board to bring you back to life, to go, come on, it's time to park that conversation. But that's a positive and a negative, isn't it? It's
You
not-
have to go into every conversation
Full on.
thinking there's potential.
Yeah. I've driven my
Yep.
board nuts with, I'll come on and go, wait to hear who I'm speaking to. And they're like, I'm pretty sure XYZ do not want to use Satago. And I go, I think they do if we did. I don't do that anymore. I wait until I'm further down the track.
No, but you pursue it, but you pursue each one until the point where there's no point in pursuing it any further. And I think that's what you have to do as an entrepreneur. And that's what you have to do when you create partnerships. You have to pursue everything up until the moment when it can't go any further, or indeed it does go further, but you can't let go too soon.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you just don't know what could have been.
It's that fine balance, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
taking it far enough to know that you've given it a good shot,
Giving it
but
a good
not
shot.
taking it too far where you're then burning
Yeah.
resource on something that isn't going to pan out. It's always that fine line.
It is a fine line, and sometimes you don't see it yourself either.
No.
But then that's why it's important to have a really good team around you.
Yep.
Like I look at you guys as co-founders. That's a great place to be, because Greg, if you go off the rails, Jenny, you're
Yeah.
there to pull them back in, and vice versa.
Multiple times a day.
Not that I say you would ever do that,
Multiple times a day.
but it's important,
Yeah.
right? Like I think, and
Yeah.
also being the CEO of a business is the loneliest place on earth, right? Because you're everything to everybody else. You've got stakeholders to manage, you've got a team to manage, and so you need to be honest, but to a point of there's probably a lot of stuff that you need to keep back. And I think having that co-founder relationship is hugely supportive.
Well, we've spoken about this before. I think running a business is as you say, running a business is very lonely. And Jen and I, we're so grateful that we actually worked together first off. Then we became friends. We have complementary skills, and fundamentally we trust each other.
Yeah.
It's not only that I couldn't imagine not doing this without Jen. I simply couldn't do it without her, and that's probably vice versa. And so I do my utmost respect to kind of individual
Absolutely.
people that run businesses,
Because it is like, even though there's scenarios where it is like the kind of fine line of like, do we carry on or do we quit?
Yeah.
You've got two perspectives
Yeah.
on it, because even getting outside advice is great, and you can have people you trust, but truly understanding a business is when you're in it and running
Yeah.
it. So having another person running the business with you is the best person to say, should we give this another week, or should we just knock this in the head now, or park it, or whatever
here
we're
are the pros, here are
deciding.
the cons.
And talking it through is, you might go in thinking already know, but it's just that, I guess, that comfort of having
Yeah.
talked it through
Yeah.
with someone else who understands the business as well as you
The
do.
validation of it as well,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Like I'm quite lucky. I've got a great team actually, and
Yes.
I've got a very good senior team around me. But sometimes it would be great to be able to just pick up the phone, even
Yeah.
at Friday evening. But
Mhm.
I would be quite conscious of that and trying not to burden the team with my crazy thoughts over a
Well,
weekend.
here you go. You can call us anytime.
Yeah.
Be careful.
You can call us anytime.
Careful what you commit to, Greg.
That's
So for our listeners who are maybe starting out on their partnership journeys, or maybe they're looking at things, so we've talked quite a lot about challenges and pitfalls. And the reason we do that is because things don't always run smoothly, and we like our listeners to be able to take away some kind of practical advice or things they can be conscious of moving into partnerships. So what would you say are either the watch outs or pieces of advice that you could give the listeners around how to kind of either set your partnership up for success, or how to deal with things when they haven't gone quite well?
Okay, so I think first thing is probably don't hang your hat on one partnership,
Yeah.
because that you
Mhm.
almost are setting yourself up for a fall. So I think it's important, as they say, like to kiss lots of frogs, you've got to speak to lots of people. And I also would say speak to lots of people within an organization, because if you're looking to work with a large corporate, they tend to go to restructures every few years, and so your prime sponsor could be moved on or
Mhm.
Yeah.
could leave. And so you've moved quite along in that relationship, and then all of a sudden it's pulled from underneath you. So I would say have multiple relationships within an organization. Don't assume that one person will,
Yeah.
kind of be your catch-all. It doesn't work like that. I think also be realistic in terms of what you want to get out of that relationship, partnership-wise, in terms of, is it a short-term step up to something else, or do you see it more long-term? If I look at what we've done at Satago and where we've had success, and I would pick Sage for this. Sage is a global partner, and we focused on the UK first and Ireland, and that's gone quite well. And so now we're in an opportunity where we can do stuff with those guys in other regions. If we were to go into those other regions just blind, the cost of that and
Yeah.
marketing, etc., would be excessive. So it's important, again, to make I would say just make an informed decision about who you're working with, and don't be scattergun either. I think don't try and do a little bit in different sectors. I mean, it depends on what your solution is, right? But I would say try to keep focused on a specific maybe sector or industry, and don't be afraid to speak to competitors, because again, you'll create a little bit of FOMO, which is always nice in this space. People don't always choose you as a partner because you're the best solution out there. They choose you because they like you as an individual, they like your team. It's not always about the solution. And so that's where I think relationships are so important, and respectful relationships, which is why I go back to this thing at the beginning. Don't oversell and overpromise, because you let somebody down, there's repercussions to that. So that just comes with experience, I think, and working with bigger companies, but same for fintechs.
Yeah. I think I started my career at Carphone Warehouse, and one of the 5 fundamentals, which has stuck with me, I think is so good, it was always under promise and over deliver. And it is just something that is, so many people do it the other way around, but it does, if you say you're going to do one thing and you do 3, it's so much more impactful than having said you've done 3 and only being able to do 2 of them. Even if you think you can deliver more, don't promise it until you're, either certain or it's pretty much done, because it's, you'll get such a better outcome having delivered more than someone's expecting, ever than having to kind of claw back an over ambitious timeline or product spec that you haven't quite managed to get over the line.
Well, it's so true, and I was even going to say that, like, in the sense of like another partnership with your board, I would look at our board as, there's somebody that I report to, but also that's like a partnership too, right? So you've got to manage that. There's nothing worse than going into a board meeting and they're like, well, what happened to that customer last week or last month? I don't see them on the deck anymore. Yeah. And you're like, so it's that kind of be realistic, and it's nice to have a hat trick in your back pocket, I think, to pull
always. Yes.
I'd also say, just kind of, you reminded me also like a practical pieces around when you've identified the right people being plural, find out which of them have actually got the sign off for whatever it is that you're producing. I think a lot of people don't ask up front, what's your sign off limit? Can you sign anything off? What you really want to ask is how much is your budget? But actually finding out who's got the sign off, who's got the budget. And we found, certainly working with corporates, that actually often it's not the HQs that have got the sign off or the budgets, it's actually the local markets. So then it's identifying all of that.
Procurement has been the death of lots of good relationships, I would say. Yeah.
Well, look, to round us off, if I may, one last question. What does the future hold for businesses when it comes to creating partnerships with each other? And what, if anything, will you and Satago be doing differently?
What would Satago be doing differently? I think we would learn from what we've gone through in the last few years. I think we've learned from that, and now we have a clear path in terms of our growth going forward. We've built a solution for SMEs, but we need the partnerships to reach those SMEs. So I would think it's building on the foundations of that. So I think that's the first thing. Second thing is focus on a region. We focused on the UK. We've now got it right in the UK. And so off the back of that, global expansion, if you like, wherever we go to next, the infrastructure is there. And so we can just build on that. I think get that right. And thirdly, God, what else did I say? I mean, look, for Satago, we're in quite a good position in that we're an established business now. We're not kind of early stage startup. We're definitely established. We've got some great customers. For us to grow going forward, it's not just about the UK. It's not just even about Europe. We have an opportunity to take stuff globally. Like I look at some of like how we met through Grow London Global. That was a phenomenal opportunity and platform to be able to take Satago out to that wider environment and go, actually, is there a market for our solution? I wouldn't have been able to do that individually. Sorry, I would have, but it would have taken me a lot longer. I wouldn't have had the intros and stuff. So when you think about partnerships, it's not just maybe the end customer, the end person you're trying to get in front of. Look at all the organizations and support that are out there, and use your own network and use the professional networks that are there, because there's lots. I mean, you can see here, like Money20 today, all the different countries in the pavilion, they have their own, they're made up of lots of local fintechs. And I mean, we did that in Singapore, right? So if I think about the opportunities that brought us, not necessarily at the time, but now, 6 months later, the follow-up conversations are happening. So it's a bit of a long game. You have to be prepared to play a long game. And my last piece would be, just on that, short-term success is usually short-term. And so while it's great to have quick wins, just think about what the longer-term goals are that you're looking for and strive towards those. But you do need the quick wins, I guess, to keep the wolves from the door to keep the accountants, investors happy, but think long term.
Yeah.
It's funny you should mention Australia. So for our listeners, Sinead and I met on a trade mission to Singapore and Australia in November, I think it was. We met lots of banks and lots of fintechs, lots of financial services companies, and we obviously had all the follow-ups with all those companies. And we're now 6, 7, 8 months on, and just this morning actually we had one of them pop back to us and say, "Oh, how are we doing with this?" Because you just never know when they're going to bob back up again. So you have to keep pursuing every opportunity. Yeah. But look, thank you so much for joining us, Sinead McHale, CEO of Satago. We hope you enjoy Money 2020 and Amsterdam.
Thanks for joining this week's Game Set Matchup. Tune in to hear more about the need-to-knows and the do's and don'ts when it comes to creating successful business partnerships.